Welcome back to another episode of the MD Investor Channel, the channel where we talk personal finance, educating ourselves and our children so we can break the cycle of generational poverty. Today, we're going to get right back into it. Today's episode is going to be Bad Financial Decision, Part 2 or Part 2. If you haven't checked out Part 1, we did 8 bad financial decisions. I think you'll learn a lot by checking that out. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Number 1, leasing a car. Leasing a car is the most expensive way to travel. Leasing a car is a very expensive way to travel. The average lease for a car is $540 per month. That's off Q2 2022. So the second quarter 2022. $540 a month. And the average lease is 36 months, 3 years. So you're paying this money for a car. Yes, it's a late model, brand new car, but you will never own it. And when the lease is up, you're going to still need a vehicle. So a lot of times it becomes a habit that you have a continuous car payment every month. When one lease is up, you get another one. So every month, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for decades and decades and decades. Very expensive way to travel. Alternative, buy a vehicle. The Millionaire Next Door, that famous book, said that the average millionaire buys a car that's about 2 years old and they pay cash for it. And they drive it for a long time. That's what you do. You buy it cash, so you don't have to pay any finance charges. So it's still relatively new, right? Within 2 years, a lot of the warranties are still active. So if something was to happen, it's still under warranty. And with a car 2 years old, not much is going to happen. You do your basic maintenance. So that's what the average millionaire does. If you want to buy a new car, the average monthly cost of a new car that you're financing, $730. $730. And that's from data from Q1 2023. The average cost of financing a car that's financing a used car, monthly average $551. So you see, it costs a lot of money to travel essentially. But the lease, where you will never own the car and it sets you up for continuous payment, is just a horrible way to go. So the recommendation is buy a car 2 years old, 1 to 2 years old, buy it cash, and drive it pretty much until the wheel falls off. That's what you do. See, but that's a mind thing, right? Because car is considered like a not a net worth, but almost like yeah. So cars seem like a status symbol, exactly. Because when you have a nice car, people look at you and they give you certain bragging rights, like, oh, look at those nice rims, nice tint. Oh, this is the Mercedes, this is the BMW. So it's a status symbol, and people love that. You're addicted to that compliment from strangers, your family. Oh, my son is doing very well. You see the car he's driving? Even though your son is sleeping in the basement on his mama's couch. Okay? So if you can just humble yourself and do not purchase that super expensive vehicle and do what millennials do and buy the car cash, 1 or 2 years old, and then use the balance and invest it, you'll be so much better off. I know, but it's hard because everybody wants to be thought of highly. They want to be highly esteemed. But let's move on. Bad financial decision. Part 2. Buying too big of a house. That goes along the same aspect. Again, status symbol. It is a place to live, but it's a status symbol. Okay? What you do when you go for a loan, right? The bank will look at your numbers and they'll say you qualify for X amount of mortgage. You may come in there, you just wanted to buy a house that was, I don't know, 300, 400,000, whatever. And they said, no, but you qualify for a mortgage of six, seven, 800,000. And you're like, oh, really? But they're doing that for their benefit, right? The bigger the mortgage, the bigger the interest that you can be paying for 30 years for most people. So what you need to go is go in there flat footed and say, no, I only want this much. And look for houses that are within your budget. The problem with buying too big of a house is that it's going to cost you, right? The house that's too big is going to require probably one, more money, more real estate taxes, and more furniture to fill up that big house to impress people that don't even like you. So buying too big of a house, buy a house that you can afford in a good neighborhood so you can use the school system. Let's move on. Number 3, bad financial decision. Getting a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. And I debated about putting this one in because having a mortgage-free, completely paid off house is definitely a psychological thing. I know that. Because people love to feel like, oh, I have no mortgage. I'm just paying the, real estate taxes and that's it. And insurance. So, but if you look at the numbers wise, when you get a 15-year versus a conventional 30-year mortgage, let's look at some of the differences. So the conventional mortgage is 30 years, right? You will have a slightly higher interest rates and your mortgage payment will be lower, right? So when you get a conventional mortgage, you will have a interest rate that'll be a little higher, but your monthly payment will be a little lower. When you get a 15-year mortgage, your interest rate is going to be a little lower, but your monthly payment is going to be a lot higher. You will pay off the house in 15 years, right? But it's going to be higher monthly payment. 30 years, you'll pay off the house. It's going to take 30 years, but your monthly payment is going to be lower, but you're going to pay so much more interest. So this is the way I think about it. If you get a 15-year mortgage, you are locked in, meaning your monthly payment is what it is, that higher amount. What you can do is get a 30-year mortgage, and if you want to pay additional money to attack the principal, then you can do that, right? Because they're not going to say you can't pay more, so you can pay more and to cut into that principal, right? So it'll take you less than 30 years. If a month comes up and money's tight, you just fall back to the stated 30-year mortgage. So you are flexible. If you get the 15-year mortgage, you're stuck at that higher payment. Or it's a tight month, you can't afford it, too bad, it's a 50-year mortgage, right? So it's better to get the 30-year mortgage where you have the option of staying at the 30-year mortgage, or you can pay a little extra. That's the way to do it. Now, with the 30-year mortgage, you also have the additional flexibility of just paying the 30-year mortgage, which is the lower mortgage, and the difference between the 30 and 15-year mortgage, that difference, if you are disciplined, you could invest that difference into the stock market, right? Most mortgages, are going around maybe 5%, 5.5%. So you could invest that additional difference between the 30 and 15 year into the stock market where you can gain a higher return, much more than 5%, right? Because if you pay for your mortgage, if you get rid of your mortgage, the most you'll pay is whatever the mortgage interest rate is, maybe 5%. But if you invest the difference, you could earn a lot more than 5%, right? You can earn potentially 10, 11%. Okay, so the 15-year mortgage, I know it's attractive to some because you feel like I'll be finished with the house in half the time, but you are stuck at that higher rate and you can't come down. Get the 30-year mortgage, and then you can pay that, and then the difference invest it. You'll probably get out ahead. And if there's a month or two where you want to pay the 15-year, you could. Okay? Let's move on. Bad financial decisions. Part two. Number four, having no college fund for your children. Number four, having no college fund for your children. Right? Your children are born, and you know in 18 years what's going to happen. In 18 years, they're going to be 18, time to go to college. And you have to prepare for that. It's not magic, right? You know it happens 18 years after they're born. Most states have a 529. It's basically a college fund that you can invest in. You can get a tax deduction for the amount you contribute. Just go on your Google and Google 529 for your state. So a lot of them have, you can invest the money, and it could be either aggressive or age-based, where it's more stocks in the beginning part, and as they get closer to age 18, time of college, they'll maybe start putting into more bonds. But that's one way. There's some other stuff you can look into for college, such as a Coverdale educational account, and I'll do a separate video on that at some time. But not having a college fund for a child, especially multiple children, right? You may have 2, 3, 4 kids, and you didn't plan for them, and now they're going to have to go into debt, right? If they can't get a scholarship and all that stuff, and they're going to have to start off life with debt. So you want to have a college fund for your children. They'll be happy, you'll be happy that you did. Number 5, too much college debt. Bad financial decision. You do not want to, be in 6-figure debt coming out of college, right? The rule of thumb is don't take out more loans than you can afford to earn, than you expect to earn in your first year out. So if you're going to anticipate earning $50,000 per year your first year out of college, then you should not have more than $50,000 in student loan. Okay? So what can we do to minimize college debt? One is the previous one, right? If you have a 529 that your parents started for you, that can help to offset college. Another thing you can do is go to a college that you can afford, right? A lot of times we want to go to the big name schools, Division I and all this stuff, and they're very expensive. Another one, stay in state. Don't go out of state. Stay in state and go to your local or your state college. That's what it's designed for, middle class people, right? I live in New York, so there's the SUNY system, State University of New York. In New Jersey, it's the Rutgers university system. So whatever your state, go to the state school. Everybody doesn't have to go to the big, flashy, private liberal arts school paying $80,000, $90,000 a year. It's not necessary. Okay, your kids can work during the summer. They can do college work study during college to offset it. Sometimes you can even go to a junior college, all right, or community college first 2 years and then transfer. So there are things that we can do to try to offset the debt that these young people are going to accumulate. Number 6 of bad financial decision is investing in an actively managed mutual fund versus something cheaper like an index fund or ETF. Actively managed mutual fund is basically where the fund manager actively decides what stocks they're going to invest in. So the fund manager, these super smart guys who went to Ivy League school, and they are managing the fund, and they're choosing. They're essentially trying to pick the winners. Which stock is going to do better? And part of the money you invest goes to the fund fees. These fees could be 1%, could be 1.5%, could be 2%. Right? It doesn't sound a lot, but over a 40-year investment lifetime, it can really eat into your returns because that money is being paid whether they beat the market, whether they beat the market, whether they perform exactly at the market, or whether they underperform the market. You're paying either way. Now compare this to an index fund or ETF. An index fund is basically a fund that try to match an index. So the index could be the S&P 500. So Standard and Poor's 500. The S&P 500 is basically an index of the 500 biggest companies in America. Johnson & Johnson, Home Depot, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, big companies like that. And they basically match this index. So when you buy a share of this index fund, you're essentially buying a piece of all 500 of these companies. You can also buy it in an ETF, which stands for an exchange traded fund, which is basically similar. An index fund, you may pay much smaller amount of fees, so maybe 0.03% expense ratio. That's what they call it, an expense ratio. So an expense ratio of 0.03, which is what you'd pay for like a Vanguard index fund or ETF, which means that you would invest, which means that they will charge you $3 for every $10,000 that you invest. So 0.03, $10,000 invested, that's 4 zeros. 0.03, you move the decimal place 4 places. And they'll charge you $3 for every $10,000 you invest. So most of your money is invested, as opposed to an actively managed mutual fund that may have an expense ratio of 0.8. An actively managed mutual fund with an expense ratio of say 0.8, you'd be paying about $80 for every $10,000 invested. That's a big difference, right? With the index fund, we said, with an expense ratio of 0.03, you'd pay about $3 for every $10,000 invested. And with that actively managed mutual fund with those super smart guys from Ivy League run the fund, expense ratio of 0.8, you'll be paying about $80 for every $10,000 invested. The difference, right? One of them is paying $3 and one is paying $80. The difference is $77. So every time you invest $10,000 in one side, only $3 is taken out. $9,997 being invested. With the other one, you put in $10,000 and $80 is being taken out, right? So only $9,920 is being invested. So what's the difference? That $77. Well, the difference in that amount extended month over month over month over month over month for 40 years would be the difference with one person with the actively managed mutual fund having an account value of $400,000, and the other person with the index fund that is a very low expense ratio having $1 million. So $400,000 and $1 million. So the difference is about $600,000. That's the difference of why you want to avoid actively managed mutual fund, and they don't perform any better. Warren Buffett had a famous wager against a hedge fund that over a 10-year period, an index fund would do better than they did. And Warren Buffett was right. His returns was much better with the index fund than the actively managed fund, because one is the fees just eat into the returns. And the winner, he got $1 million, which he gave to charity. So, you want to look into what you're investing in and make sure it's not an actively managed fund. The index funds, from Vanguard and also other companies too, Fidelity and so on, they're very cheap. Okay, so 0.03, 0.04, very cheap. That's what you want. Okay. Number 7 of bad financial decisions, part 2, is stock picking versus index fund investing. Right? Warren Buffett says, for the average person, which most of us are average, we all like to think that we are above average, but most of us are going to be average. We would do better by just buying an index fund. We get the average annualized return, which is 10%. Some years it's going to be 15, 20. Bad years, you may lose, maybe down 5%, but on a whole, we'll get about 10% per year. So the average person, that is fine. You can be wealthy just by doing that month after month, week after week investing. Okay? Stock picking is when you're trying to beat the market, right? Because with the index fund, you're not gonna beat the market because you are the market. But with stock picking, they're trying to see if they can beat the market. Which of these stocks are going to overperform? And they analyze. So if you're going to do this correctly, one, you have to be reading the expense report. You have to be doing deep dive researching the conference calls. I mean, it's a lot to do. The average person, I don't know, we have the energy, the wherewithal, the background to really be doing this. So I don't know why we shouldn't be doing this. What you could do if you want a mixture is maybe you say, you know what, I like the idea of an index fund, but I want to do a little gambling. I want to, trying to hit a home run. The index fund is basically base hit after base hit after base hit. But who knows that you can win a baseball game by continuously getting base hit? Everybody gets base hit, base hit. You can win a game like that, right? Stock picking is trying to hit a home run all the time, home run, but there's gonna be a lot of strikeouts. So if you want to have a little mixture of both, you can say, you know what, I'm going to put 80% or 85% or whatever number you feel comfortable with into the index fund where, I'm going to be the market. But then my other portion over here where I'm going to do a little speculation, 10, 15, 20%, then I'll try to pick what stocks I think are going to overperform. Is it going to be Google? Is it going to be Apple? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? This small tech stock that's doing big things, the big whatever. That's a way you can kind of do a little both, okay? And then you can kind of see who's gonna, so that way you can combine the best of both worlds. Number 8, in bad financial decision, is not teaching your children personal finance. You know that had to be in there, right? You got to teach your children because you think that it's going to be automatic. No, it's not going to be automatic. They will not pick up this information unless they're actively taught, right? I had to teach myself, but it doesn't have to be that way for our children. We can kind of mentor them and guide them along the way so they know the basics of mortgage and student loan and bad debt and good debt and interest arbitrage and purchasing a vehicle versus buying a vehicle. And it just teaches your children. Okay? So let's quickly review bad financial decisions part 2. Number 1, leasing a car. We don't want to do that, right? We want to buy a car that's about 1 or 2 years old and pay for it in cash, okay? And then use that money that we are saving to grow our wealth. Number 2, buying too big of a house. Don't let the bank convince you that you're eligible for this bigger mortgage than you had planned to do it. No, get the house that you can afford in a good neighborhood and use the school system. Number 3, 15-year mortgage versus 30-year mortgage. We know that emotionally it feels better to finish paying your mortgage, but you have to think that extra payment that you are forced to pay because now you're locked in at 15% could be used to invest in the stock market and grow at a higher rate of return. So get the 30-year mortgage, and then if you want to, some months you want to pay a little extra, do it, but you're not forced to. And the difference you can use to invest. Number 4, having no college fund for your children. You have to open a 529. Open a 529 for them, and just contribute to it. And then in 18 years, you'll be very happy that you did. Especially if you have, especially if you have multiple kids. Number 5, getting too much college debt. That goes for both us and our children. But in terms of our children, listen, I know everybody wants to go to big name schools, but be responsible. For the average person, go to your in-state school, and don't take out more loan. If you have to take loan, don't take out too much. Okay? Don't take out too much. Get a degree that's marketable. I forgot to mention that. Get a degree that is marketable. Okay? All right? Get a degree that you can use and make some money. Absolutely. And if you want to do a couple more things to kind of make the cost less, maybe go to a junior college and then transfer the credit, right? Maybe work during the summers. Maybe work at college work study during college. Number 6, actively managed fund. Actively managed mutual fund versus index fund or ETF. Actively managed fund is way too expensive. Get the index fund, right? Get the ETF. It performs well and it's much lower cost, and you're going to be happy you did. Number 7 is related: stock picking versus index fund investing. Index fund investing is the cheaper way to go. The returns are great, and it takes no time. You don't have to do any research. And the stock picking, you have to be right. Are these the stocks that are going to overperform? Are these the stocks that's going to overperform? Nobody knows. Nobody has a crystal ball. You can combine both and put a portion into your index fund, 80%, and then maybe speculate in a more risky stocks with the other 20%. You may hit a home run, but even if you don't, the most of your money is over here. Number 8 is not teaching your children personal finance. That's our responsibility. The school is not going to do it. The church is not going to do it. Nobody's going to do it. We have to teach our children personal finance. Otherwise, they will not get it. And that's how we do it on the MD Investor. So we can educate ourselves and our children so we can break the cycle of generational poverty. And if people out there you think would benefit from this content, let them know about the MD Investor. I would appreciate a subscription. And until next time, command your money to grow.